Morning and welcome back to the Closers Inner Circle podcast with your host, Denise Griffitts and Bengay III. Now, in past episodes of the Closers Inner Circle podcast, for the past couple of years at any rate, we've delved very deeply into the high-level strategies and advanced techniques found in the Closers Part 2. Now it's time to take a step back and spotlight the book that laid the foundation for modern sales mastery, and that's the Closers Part 1 by Ben. In this episode, we're revisiting the original blue book, and it is blue, that's helped millions of people sharpen their closing skills, build unshakable confidence, and adopt the winning mindset of a true sales professional. So tune in as we break down the classic lessons, proven closing methods, I can do this, and timeless sales. I can. And timeless sales wisdom that launched a movement and shaped a generation of closers. And by the way, this podcast is sponsored by What's Right with America by my friends Paul Johnson and Larry Aldrich. Listen, regardless of what you see on the nightly news or hear from politicians, I just shuddered when I said that word, America is the greatest superpower in history. And those who live here will experience a future of fantastic abundance for the remainder of the century and beyond, and that's what they say. So is America's future bright as its past? What's Right with America argues that not only is the answer an emphatic and profound yes, but the nation's most incredible days are yet to come. So despite the challenges and the divisions that we face, America's true strength lies in its core principles and the resilient spirit of its people. You can find What's Right with America now on Amazon and tell them I sent you. Good morning, Ben. It's Wednesday. I can almost talk today.
You can't pronounce words sometimes, but you can talk.
Do I have to make sense? You never told me I had to make sense. We need to talk about this.
I'm a news junkie, as you know, and if we're watching television, the news is on. Gigi will say, "Can I talk?" And I say, "Well, give it a try and we'll see." And she says, "Oh, may I talk?" And I said, "Certainly."
You're so good to her since the baby came.
I'm
sure she appreciates that.
I have only a few zingers I can get her with nowadays. So this morning I heard a noise, and I'm a little hard of hearing. And I said, is that your stomach growling? She said, "I'm surprised you heard that." And I said, "I'm sorry, what'd you say?" And she started.
Why does she let you in the house? This is my question. This has always been my question. Why does she let you in there?
She started to repeat herself, and she got about 2 words in and said, "Oh, you got me."
Yeah. You guys are funny.
It's a good day in California. I hope it is in Louisiana, and that you survived. We talked about it a little bit off mic. I keep hearing about these terrible storms in the southeast and hurricane-like gusts, and a foot of rain here and a foot of rain there and so on. And I always worry about you. And invariably, as I asked you this morning, "Are you okay?" And you said, "About what?"
I had no idea. In fact, just before I came in here and grabbed my headset, I was outside, blue skies, beautiful day, spraying for fleas. There's no rain. I didn't even know there was anything heading my way. But my mom used to do this when she was still living. I would get these men. She would call, "Are you okay? What's going on? What are you talking about?" Like I did with you. What? What are you talking about? And she said, "Well, I'm watching the Weather Channel." Mom, we've talked about this. Don't watch that. And if Jim Cantor shows up, turn it off. We're fine.
It always happens somewhere else in my case, and I worry about friends and so on. I did a talk somewhere one day on the East Coast, and when I got finished, this lady came up to me and said, "I can't believe you're here." And
Why?
I said, "Yeah, well, if that were said in a softer tone, I would have said, 'Well, it's my pleasure and my honor.'" But she said it in an accusatory tone. And I said, why do you say that?" She said, Well, California's about to have an earthquake and break off into the sea, and you've left your wife and children back there alone. And I said, honey, I've lived in California now. I've lived in California over 50 years, and I've never felt an earthquake. One time I was in a swimming pool at Danny Cox's house, late great speaker and sales trainer. And I was in the swimming pool swimming. When I came up, uh, the whole family was standing there because they knew I'd never felt an earthquake. Do you feel it? You feel it? Well, when you're in a swimming pool, you don't feel earthquakes. So I had an opportunity to feel an earthquake and didn't have it. So
Oh,
I'm now since 1967 when I moved back. I lived here as a little kid before, but since 1967 when I moved back, all my friends elsewhere are worried about earthquakes and this and that and so on. And I've just been blissfully wandering around. Haven't felt one, haven't been in a death defying storm or forest fire or mudslides. On television, California is a horrible place. But if you walk around with me, you won't feel anything.
there you go. And I was born and raised in the Bay Area. It was not unusual, excuse me, to wake up with my bed hanging in the closet. You know, we would just scoot across the floor, and I would. I was the only one that had my own bedroom. And, you know, what the heck? Oh, yeah, earthquake. Okay. Nobody cared. They just didn't bother. Now, there was one some years ago where I could not reach my family for several days. That one scared me.
Yeah.
But, you know,
And
things happen.
it's the silence that gets to me occasionally. When Southern California was burning and lost, I don't
Yeah.
know, 1,200 homes or something. I've got a lot of friends down there, and because some of the phone lines were down, I guess I couldn't reach them, and maybe
And
the cell towers were down. And silence is worse than hearing some horror tale because you assume the worst. I called a friend of mine the other day, Richard Burns. I bank on some people calling me occasionally because that's the type of people they are. And it dawned on me he hadn't called in a long time. He's in his 80s. They sold their home, bought an RV, and decided to travel around the country, which is a wonderful concept, except it sucks.
did you find him? I sent you a note last week. Did you ever locate him?
Well, I called and it said, uh, we're sorry that number has been disconnected and there's no new number. Well, it's a cell phone. He's riding around in an RV. So that means, with my quick mind, he's died.
Right.
And
And you
so,
had me convinced too.
yeah. So I called a couple times a day for the next 2 or 3 days. And on one of the calls, he says, Richard Burns, Benjamin, how are you? And I said, God, I am so relieved. I thought you were dead.
Oh, geez.
He said, why would you think that? Because you're 80 some odd years old riding around an RV and your phone is disconnected for the first time in the 40 years I've known you. That's why. Well, he swapped carriers, and the
Oh,
swap didn't go as you know. You keep your number, keep your phone, whatever. In theory, I guess that's right. It doesn't necessarily work.
no, it doesn't. I've had to have two new numbers since 3 years ago because they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're going to move you over." No, sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, I've got a
Oh,
bunch of old phone numbers that I've saved because some people that's the only number they have. And I don't even bother to ask people anymore what number to call. I just keep them all. I have the 800 number that we used to open the National Communication Center in '76. I think that's my oldest one, and I just wouldn't give it up. And all the carriers said, "Well, swap over here. We'll give you a new phone, and you can keep your phone number." And I said, "No,
mm-mm.
no, I'm not willing to try that." I haven't won the lottery. I don't think I would do well swapping phone numbers or swapping phones. Well, I've got a couple of things that came up during the week, and then we'll get into the official sales stuff.
Yeah.
These were a couple of quick conversations from old friends of yours and mine. and it was along the lines of, I haven't heard you tell this story in a while, or could you expand on that, or whatever. And one of them was, I was walking through the house. This is an old story, but I don't think I've ever said it here. I was walking through the house one day, and we had a couple of our nieces visiting, and they were the nieces who are, now 17, the oldest one. But when this happened, she was 6 or something, because it was at least 10 years before. One of them, the young one, looked into the pistachio bowl, and we are fanatical pistachio eaters. I used to feel guilty. Now I've discovered it's a health food, high in plant protein, high in fiber. You can't eat enough pistachios.
I love
And
them. They're my
oh,
favorite. The
yeah.
pecans, but my pecans, I just pick them up off the ground in my backyard.
Mm,
They're really fresh.
yeah. The with the pistachios, a friend of mine gave us a big burlap bag. I say a 50-pound bag, but it would be 50 pounds if it were potatoes. That size of bag of
Right, right.
roasted, lightly salted pistachios. And I said, God, that's a lifetime supply. Well, between staff members, family members, visitors, it's not a lifetime supply. It did last a few months, but what it really did was get us all hooked on pistachios. And so I figured, I don't eat a lot of bad things. My weight's under control, et cetera. How bad could it be? And then I heard on television the other day one of the talking head health experts, if you like potato chip like treats, throw out all your potato chips and start eating pistachios. And they went into all the reasons why. And so everybody I saw that day, I said, "Good news, we're not sinning after all. Eat all you want." But anyway,
I
the
love those. And my cat, my little black cat, you see it on my little logo, nerd
huh.
stilettos. I have a black cat and a pair of black stilettos, and he's wrapped around it. He really does exist, and his name is the Vicar because he's completely black. He's a Burmese, but he has a white priest collar, which he pays no attention to at all. And he loves pistachios. I've put them in the pantry. I've double bagged them. I have to put him in the fridge because he'll get them. I can put him on the very top shelf. He finds them. I don't know how.
I thought they were safe sitting out on the counter in the snack room. But maybe I'm wrong because we got 2 cats wandering around.
Better
And
watch him. I'm telling you,
yeah,
he will find. If he could open that refrigerator, I promise you he would.
are they salted and roasted?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, now I don't like my cats anymore.
Well, some people
Anyway,
trust, but he's like I said, he doesn't take his holy orders seriously. So
well, speaking of black living things, that's part of the story. As I'm walking through the kitchen area, um, the younger one, who's now 12 or something, said, "Have you ever noticed that when we get near the bottom of the uh, pistachio bowl before it's refilled, that the ones that are there are the closed ones that are hard to open, or you have to use a nutcracker or something? Is that because they're heavier than the others and they sink to the bottom?" And the older niece said, "No. Uncle Ben and I call that the black moth theory." And I thought, what the hell is the black moth theory? Well, it turns out years ago, at least 10 years ago, she came home from school. This uh, Kids are listening. I guess it's sort of the overriding theme here. Be careful what you say. Your program, and whether you realize it or not. She said, uh, years ago, I came home from school having heard a thing about evolution and told Uncle Ben about it. Her teacher had told her that in Pennsylvania and Kentucky, in the coal country, where there are literally sides of hills that are just black because they're coal, that the birds were eating the moths, and the moths figured out if they uh, became black, then the birds might not eat them. So that's the reason in coal country there are a lot of black moths. And I said, your teacher told you that? She said, yeah. And I said, moths don't decide things. Uh, there's something wrong with this story.
Yeah, no
So,
kidding.
but that's how the black moth theory fit into the pistachios. I called the teacher and I said, I will not uh, countermand you. We support teachers even when you're wrong. Here's one you're wrong about. And I said, here's what happened. The black moths, which were already there, were not as visible to the birds as the colored moths were. So they ate the colored moths, and that left the black moths to proliferate and do well, and so on. They didn't decide to be black. And she says, "Huh, that makes sense. Let me check on that, and I'll tell my kids tomorrow. I'll correct my story." I said, "We'll do it gently. Don't look like you were wrong. Look like here's some additional information." So she thanked me profusely. And the next day, when Denise went to school, the teacher got up and said, "Now let's expand on the black moth theory," and so on. And she explained it properly. Evolution was you didn't get killed because you were black, or you didn't get killed because as a frog because you had a longer neck and the vegetation was up high. And she went through a whole thing that was absolutely accurate. So it turns out when the pistachio bowl, she said, in this case, we are the birds. We approach the bowl and we eat the ones that are standing open, they're a quarter-inch crack.
All
So
right.
because it's easier, quicker, tastes better, they got more salt on them, etc. And the ones that don't fit that thing are left in the bowl. And after a while, they're the only ones left in the bowl. After a while, therefore, they're at the bottom of the bowl. It's not because they're heavier. It's not because they decided that the people who come in tend to eat the ones that are open. It's just that's the way it works out. And I thought to myself, I congratulated her for remembering the story and applying it to something entirely different. But once I remembered the story, 10 years later, verbatim, and that's what Uncle Ben and I call the black moth theory.
Oh my gosh.
So they're listening all the time,
Oh yeah, yeah, they
and
are.
and good news, bad news, accurate news doesn't make any difference. And then somebody else said, I don't think it was the same person. Somebody else said, tell them about Johnny Hyde, my friend who was the disc jockey, first person to play Beatles music in the United States. Went up head up against Rush Limbaugh, and I can't think of the other guy's name with a real deep voice. Two big people in radio when they were all in Sacramento local. They never beat Johnny Hyde in the ratings, not once. And they moved away and went national. And they said, we were number one in Sacramento. And Rush Limbaugh's sidekick said, no, you weren't. You never beat Johnny Hyde. So
Oh.
I thought that was nice. And Johnny loved it. He's since gone to his great reward. But one day he was watching me use my vegetable chopper, probably bought on television or at a county fair, where you can put the vegetables on top and hit the handle down and they drop into the plastic container on the bottom. And it's just a wonderful way to cut things up quickly into little cubes. And the cutter has different sizes and shapes. Excuse me. And you can shred things with a different attachment and so on. Johnny said, I want one of those. And I said, well, the county fair is coming to town. We'll go over there and wander around. I'd love to listen to the salesmen and women in their booths. And so we go up to a guy. He's got the exact same. There's a bunch of them on the market, but he has the exact same one I have. And I said, hi. I'd like to buy my friend one of those. And he said, well, you have to wait a few minutes. And I said, why? He said, well, I got to gather up a crowd and then I'll give the demonstration. I said, we don't need a demonstration. We just want to buy one. He said, I can't do that. Just hang on for a few minutes, but be sure and buy early in the demonstration because that'll encourage other people to buy. Well, I'll start when there's 15 or 20 people here. I said, I'm really not interested in you getting a crowd of 15 or 20 people. I want to buy a food chopper now. I can't do it, but just give me a few minutes. I said, Johnny, he's too stupid to buy a food chopper from.
Oh,
Let's go on. I'll get you one on television or something. We walk down the sidewalk, whatever you call it, where you got booths on either side. Go around the corner, and there's a guy selling food choppers. Very similar. There's a sales story in here, folks. Very similar. I think the color was different, but it was the exact same concept as my food chopper. And so I walked up to him and I said, I'd like to buy a food chopper for my friend. He said, okay, they're $20 or $19.99, whatever they were. I gave him the money. He gave me the food chopper. And I said, let me tell you a story. Your competition, who's on the other side of that curtain and about 30 feet down, I tried to buy one from him and he wanted me to, I had to watch the demonstration, help him draw a crowd, buy in front of the crowd to encourage other sales. He said, yeah, he doesn't do very well at these things.
you think?
I said, yeah, you're right.
I
So,
almost said, you reckon?
yeah. So he takes my 20 or whatever it was, hands me the food chopper. And as I start to walk away, he said, if you and your buddy here would like to stay just a few minutes, I'm about to start a demonstration, which will make you get more out of the food chopper that you've already bought. And I said, yeah, we'll stay for that.
See, that was smart.
Is that clever? And the only difference is he got caught up in the procedure he'd been taught. Gather a crowd, do something to get 15 or 20 people in front of you, give the demonstration to everybody, hope somebody buy, or have a shill who steps forward and buys, and whatever. But, do it that way. And he went, oh, okay. Probably made a mental note or written note. And that's the way he does it. The other guy was there to sell food choppers. He doesn't care what you know, where you know it, how you heard about it, or anything else. Which reminds me of another great sales story. Jimmy Rucker and I are in Atlantic City on the boardwalk, and we were in the Coast Guard. So this was our first leave after, I think it was 12 weeks or something of being cooped up in boot camp. And so we're out, drinking beer, chasing girls. Oh, it didn't work out, but we drank beer. And
I don't know why I find that so hysterical, but I do. Sorry. Sorry, Jimmy.
we're standing on the boardwalk, and this lady is doing a demonstration. Maybe a man, it's not important, but was doing a demonstration about something, and little ceramic things were involved. And I thought my sister would like that. So the guy invites everybody inside the shop. Whatever he was doing out there was just to get your attention. Then you go in the shop, and I guess they hope you buy more things. But this lady, he says, so come on in. And this lady behind me in the crowd, she's one of the prospects, pushes me in the back and said, let's go in and see what we got, what they got. And I turned around, and she had the weirdest looking eyes. They looked like a border collie. Normal looking person, but the eyes were just mesmerizing for the wrong reasons. But she said, let's go and see what they got. So we walk in. They did whatever they were doing. I bought whatever I wanted for my sister, took it back to the hotel room. And as we're getting ready to go out the next day, I checked it, and there was something wrong with it. It was broken or had a chip in it or something. And I said, since we're going to be going right down there, I'm going to take this into the shop and get it replaced. Jimmy said, fine. We walk into the shop, and I said, I got this problem with so-and-so. And he says, well, the owner will have to handle that. Hang on one second. He goes in the back, and out comes the owner. She has border collie eyes. It's the same lady that punched me in the back. And I realized that she was a pusher. That's what they call them in the business. She was a pusher and the owner of the shop. So I went in, bought it, and then came back and got it replaced. She couldn't have been nicer about it. But I did it because somebody was a shill, a pusher in the crowd to get you in. She was the marketing person. And people are always arguing on what's more important, sales or marketing. And I
Sales.
said, well, yes, but if it weren't for marketing, you wouldn't have anybody to sell.
That's true, but if you
Yeah,
can make that sale right then, right there, stop marketing.
exactly. So it's both is the real answer, but minus marketing, I really wouldn't want to spend my life as a salesperson. I'd like to talk to somebody who has some interest because their interest has been piqued by an ad, a printed ad, a commercial on television, something. I woke up one morning not knowing there were food shoppers, saw it on television and a couple of times and bought. And then a year or two later, Johnny Hyde and I are wandering around a county fair trying to buy another one. That was marketing that did that. And it took a live human being, took two actually, a live human being to sell us on it and accept the money and so on. So that's the food chopper story, and that's the black moth story.
Uh, and
And
I
my
have to ask, I
obligation,
have to interject here. Isn't Johnny Hyde your husband-in-law?
it, yeah, he was, yeah, he was married to my second wife before me. But that's a great phrase. I think I've told you we have friends who they own a restaurant, and they have a guy who plays there in the band. But I knew that the guy in the band was the owner's former husband. And so you wonder how are they going to get along? Tim is sitting at the bar frequently and so on. So I walk in and there they are, laughing and giggling. I said, "It's nice to see you two getting along like that." And since you shared Sheila, and that's what they said to me. Oh, we're husbands-in-law.
There you go.
They had put their differences, if any, behind them.
Right.
As long as the beer was free, because one was a guitar player and the other one was the wife of the owner. As long as the beer was free, they were happy campers.
Family reunion every year. So,
Every day, every afternoon.
oh my god, they were drunks.
But
Okay.
I've never heard that term before, husbands-in-law. I thought that was so cute. Uh, Therefore, I'm ready to go on the sales aspect, pure sales. Tell me what you want, what you've promised people, and I'll do it.
Really? You're
I-
you're
I'll do it, but what did you tell them we were going to talk about?
I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say. I'd like to start because we have covered the Closers Part 2, which is a very important book, and we all know that. And we'll probably go back to it again next year. Can you believe we're in the final quarter of this year. But what we really haven't spent much time in, it was the original book, and I know you didn't write it, and we'll talk about that. But it really laid the foundation, still continues to lay the foundation for everything that you have done all through your sales, life. And it's actually known as a sales Bible. So why don't we just start from the beginning?
Super. Very beginning is when I founded and ran the first toll-free call center in the world. Start saying the United States, but might as well get credit for the world. The National Communications Center in 1976. 80 some odd percent of Americans didn't know an 800 number was toll free to them. It wasn't toll free to the owner of the number, but to them it was. So we had to create an industry and educate the public at the same time. And it was a bit of a challenge, and almost no phone printed ads and commercials on television had 800 numbers in them for the same reason. So having 150 operators or so in the answering service business, I farmed out to the ones I could trust various magazines and newspapers and so on and and then I wrote a 6-letter series of why you should have an 800 number in your ad. If you bought after the first letter, we took you out of the series. If it took the second letter, we do that up to 6 letters before we threw in the towel and gave up on that particular prospect. So we assigned let's say, Success Magazine to somebody and Vanity Fair to somebody and so on, gave them a little penknife, one the artists use, to cut out the ad, send it to word processing, and they would send out the 6-letter series, hopefully getting you to sign up, explaining to you why an 800 number was a good idea, probably made up some statistics that turned out to be conservative. Actually, your sales will go up by this percent with an 800 number and so on. Once you explain to your prospect what an 800 number is and so on. The reason it was a wonderful idea and the reason so few people had them in their ads was uh, they didn't know. It was a new concept to them, and B, if they thought, oh, I'll put an 800 number in my ad, they called the phone company and discovered an 800 number was $10,000 in front each month for 240 hours of time. And when the month was over, if you hadn't used your 240 hours, you got a new bill for $10,000 and the unused portion went away. If, however, you were really successful and used more than your 10 hours, you got a new bill for $10,000 for next month, plus overtime from the previous month. Long story short, people couldn't afford 800 numbers. It's the reason only Xerox and IBM and so on had them primarily from outgoing marketing and service calls. They didn't sell any retail product. They didn't make any difference. However, I had worked in the timeshare business, not personally selling timeshare, but we were sort of there at the beginning. And the thing that I liked about timeshare now, it's more sophisticated and a better deal. But back then, you have a hotel room or apartment, call it what you want, and you can sell it once, or you can figure out a way to sell it 52 times a year. Actually, 51, because they want 1 week every year to refurbish it and clean it up and so on. But you stayed in the same room or apartment every year. What they had done was take expensive property in fancy places, Miami, Colorado Springs, etc. Take fancy property and break it down so that everybody could afford, or not everybody, but most people could afford to buy a week of the timeshare if they wanted. I looked at the $10,000 upfront fee for the phone bill and said, what if we split that up among several people? And they said, well, how do you know to do that? And I said, well, for years, magazines have said, write to, mail in your money or whatever, to department number whatever, or some word. Well, what they were doing is trying to figure out which advertising worked. If
Oh,
you
that
got,
makes sense.
yeah, the Wall Street Journal had a different number or code than the New York Times did, than Time Magazine did, and so on. And that's how they sorted them out. So I said, Self said, huh? I said, why don't we take the phone number, give it an extension number or operator number, then everybody that's a client, corporate client, uses the same phone number. And when we answer the phone, we say, thank you for calling. Do you have an operator number if they didn't ask for it right off the bat? Yes, operator 231. Super. And then, before we had computers on every desk, they had a big thing in front of them, like a Sears catalog. They turned to page 231 and said, this is operator 231. I've been asked to take, whatever the script said, because I wrote a script for every one of 1,500 clients at any given time. And that's how we sorted them out. And we knew that this order went here and this order went there and so on. It was terribly efficient and enabled us to, I forget the exact number, but instead of $10,000 a month, you could get an 800 number with an extension number for, I think it was $150, which bought you so many calls. Over that, we billed you for the number of orders we took for you. So if you were hugely successful, one of our bigger ones was Xerox. Another one was the Sharper Image. They used to sell expensive executive toys, basically.
Yeah, Airplane. I
Yeah,
always grabbed that glossy magazine and took it home with me. Never bought anything, but I liked everything in it.
yeah. Well, that was owned by Richard Tallheimer, son or grandson of the Tallheimer department stores on the East Coast. And he was one of our biggest clients because he ran in all sorts of magazines, sold uh, pocket calculators and stuff you don't need, but it sounds fascinating.
Oh, yeah. I may still have one hidden away in the closet. Kinda like the old
All right.
Sears catalog, Christmas. It's nostalgic. You keep one.
If it's an old one, the phone number at the bottom of his ad is 800-824-7888 because it's one of the numbers over the years I've kept. So my job, since I read the Wall Street Journal every day anyway, I took the Wall Street Journal and I started cutting out ads that didn't have 800 numbers in them and sending them down to word processing. One of them, as it turned out, was so poorly written I almost didn't cut it out, but it had something to do with closing, and that caught my eye. And I wasn't even sure what it was. And as I went to clip it out, it said send, I don't know how much it was, $15, $20 for this thing. I said, it must be a book. Such a poorly written ad, and you don't know what they're selling. So I wrote my personal check, clipped it to the typing request and the ad, and sent it down to word processing. Never gave it another thought. I was done. If the book had never come, it turned out it was a book. If the book had never come, I wouldn't have thought about it, wouldn't have remembered it. But it seemed like impulse made me do it, and curiosity.
Now, we've talked about this, Ben. That was a God wink.
Yeah, it probably was. A few weeks later, this package shows up. I think I've told you today I wouldn't open it without a bomb squad there. It sort of looked like it'd been sent from a mental institution, crayon on the cover of the envelope. The envelope was not designed for mailing a book, etc. Pulled out the book. It said the closers. It wasn't part one yet. It said the closers, and then I riffled through it. I don't know if that's the right word, where you hold it in one hand and run your thumb over the pages, and pages shot out all over my office. And so I thought, oh, God, it was so poorly done. There's a whole story as to why that was true, too. But I gathered up the pages, went to throw them in the trash can, which was sitting right next to the Hartman briefcase I've been hauling around the world for 50 years. And I thought, no, I put a rubber band around it. I said, here's my theory. I will, next time I'm on the way on a long flight in New York or something, I'll read it and then I'll leave it in the back seat of the seat in front of me on the plane, because obviously this isn't going to be a keeper. Well, I started reading it on the plane, the closers, and I felt like I'd found the Dead Sea Scrolls, poorly written, misspelling. It turned out the reason for the bad binding was there were three guys involved in publishing it. One of them worked in a print shop. So when the owner went home at night, they snuck back into the print shop and printed 500 copies of the closers. And
So it was a purloined book.
yeah, and they didn't know how to run the binding machine. The partner who worked at the print shop apparently did something else in the facility, but he had some general idea, and that's what I got. But on the plane, I thought, my God, this is really good stuff. Sometimes I had to look for the next page wasn't necessarily in order, but I went to the payphone at LaGuardia and dropped my dime or 25 cents, whatever it was, called, and I said, hi. Uh, I just read the closers, and they said, Mr. Gay, whoever it was on the phone, Roy Brandley, I think. He said, Mr. Gay, how are you? And I said, I didn't give you my name. And he said, well, we printed 500 copies of that book. We ran one ad one day in the Wall Street Journal. We sold one book. So if you've read the closers, your name is Ben Gay, and you live in Placerville, California. And I said, God, I said, well, let's not be coy. It's a horribly written book and it's a horribly printed book. He said, I apologize for that. You're right. And he told me the story about what had happened. And that the guy who wrote the book, although he was a sales uh, idiot savant, uh, barely could read or write himself. And that was for the bad writing. I said, well, look, I'm cutting the story somewhat short, believe it or not. I said, look, I've got a market for this, and I'd like to get the publishing rights or whatever, but I want to rewrite it, but taking the basic stuff. He said, deal. He said, and we worked out a royalty per book. And I said, how many more do you have? And he said, like I said, we printed 500.
499.
Yeah, we sold one. I don't have to go count. We have 499. Where do I ship them? So I gave him the address. We got it in. I went to work and redid it and so on. Then, not knowing the publishing industry like I should have, I knew the cosmetic industry and lots of retail products and so on. My purchasing agent said, how many should we buy? And I said, well, I don't know. We sell, lots of everything we decide to sell. I said 50,000. And just off the top of my head, he said we can get a good price break at that point. So
You
I said,
think?
yeah,
I bet you
50,000.
reckon? Seriously.
It turned out it was the highest price break you could get. There was nothing beyond that. That was as low as you could get the printing costs down. So, but I didn't know at that point that the average book, no matter what the genre is, and probably in sales it's even less, sells 500 books before, and there's never a reorder. This isn't, because Henry Kissinger has written his memoirs or something, they sell millions, but the average book's 500. I got 50,000 coming and soon in the warehouse. And so I said to the sales team, we have a problem. What we must do is sell 5,000 books, 50,000 books. So,
I like how you shuffled that off onto someone else.
of course, delegation is the key to success.
That's exactly right. Don't do it yourself.
So we went through our distributor network and ads in the magazine. Someday we'll talk about that because that was ingenious. We were one of the largest advertisers in sales and personal development magazines, Success, Entrepreneur, sales, Specialty Salesman, Salesman's Opportunity, etc. There are a few dozen of them. Ever full page ads in every magazine every month. And this is a teaser for a future show. I didn't have a penny in any of them. Same with the yellow pages. I worked out a way to be the largest yellow page advertiser in the country, and we didn't have a penny sunk in advertising. So make a mental note and bring that up next time, perhaps.
Got it.
So off we went, and suddenly, probably a few months later, Dennis Griffitts, my purchasing guy, came in and said, we're about out of books. And I was greatly relieved. And I said, get the number that makes sense based on what we've sold in the period of time and so on. I was just glad we'd sold 50,000 books because that didn't seem possible after I got to know a little bit more about the publishing business. And it came from clipping out a little bitty, poorly written, unclear ad from the Wall Street Journal. So back to sales, or, is sales or marketing more important? In that case, at that point in the evolution of the book, marketing was more important.
I can see that.
Yeah, because and everybody who bought it had to buy it sight unseen. It was probably 6 months before we started getting referral business. My friends got the book and so on. So now I haven't run an ad in over 30 years. It's all referral business. Somebody has the closers, they tell a friend about it, or Closers Part 2 or any of the others, tell a friend about it, and they pick up the phone or go on the internet and call and order. So there it was marketing. but it was also selling in that I wrote a killer ad. The headline of the ad in the Wall Street in all of the magazines, but we also ran quarter page ads in the Wall Street Journal and so on. The headline was Greed, GREED, exclamation mark, all caps. And then the text was one of those Joe Sugarman type ads, a story, 3 columns of type and lots of opportunities to buy. Uh, in other words, if you read a little bit and you were thrilled, you went right to the 800 number and ordered. If you had to read the whole page, fine. And I was taught that technique by Joe Sugarman personally and Joe Carbo. He wrote Lazy Man's Way to Riches and was the first guy to ever run an ad like that. And he sold over 1 million copies of Lazy Man's Way to Riches using a technique that had never been used before. And basically, I stole that idea. Many of the ideas I have are borrowed from.
See, we don't say stolen down here.
No,
we say relocated.
No. Relocated, yeah.
Yeah.
Floyd, I think you said earlier. So anyway, that was how the closers that we're going to spend some time in came to being. And then, and we'll cover this more in the weeks to come, I applied to that the foundations of selling. Have a quality product. We had that. That's competitively priced. We had that. We were on the high end of what a paperback should sell for, but not by much. And sell to qualified people. Well, the qualified people, the people want to get better and maybe get rich overnight, they read what I lovingly call the flake magazines. They read Salesman's Opportunity Specialist, Salesman, so on. Serious, successful business people don't know those magazines exist until you get up to maybe Success, sort of, and then Entrepreneur, Better, and other business magazines. The Wall Street Journal did very well for us, which was sort of funny since that's where it started, was that I clipped out that little ad. And then we went back to, and it's all spelled out in the closers part 1. We went back to the basics: qualified product, quality product, competitively priced, sell to qualified people, tell them what's in it for them. That's the radio station all people operate on, WII-FM, what's in it for me. And then we developed what I call sudden service. We still do that all these years later. If you order today, your book is in the mail today. If you order by 2 p.m. Monday through Friday, it's in the mail today. If you order by 11 a.m. Saturday, in the mail today. The only day we don't ship is Sundays and national holidays. By the way, speaking of national holidays, I went to the post office to pick up something the other day, and I was the only one there. Parking lot was empty.
Columbus Day.
Well, I didn't know.
Yeah. I didn't know there was a hurricane coming, so we're good.
Yeah. So when I went back in the other day, yesterday, to get it, I said, "Thank you very much, folks, for telling me that it was Columbus Day." I look like the only idiot in Placerville who didn't get the word. When you're standing in an empty post office with the lights dim and the inner door locked, you realize there's something going on no one told me about. And Columbus Day, or Indigenous People Day, as some people were calling it, was the reason. So, since then, with rapid service, sharp marketing, and so on, and using many of the techniques that are in the closers part 1, we took a book that sold 1 copy to me and turned it into the all-time bestseller in the sales field.
It's known as the Bible, seriously.
Yeah, that's what people call it. In the timeshare business, there are people who still laugh when they were selling timeshare at one of the big resorts. They used to live on site because the place was out, in the countryside as a resort, wasn't right in town like a lot of them are now. So they stayed on the property, and they were told to sleep with the closers under their pillow, in addition to reading it during the day, So if only by osmosis
Osmosis.
they would learn. I was walking through the same county fair. We go once a year because Gigi's local and knows so many people. It's a reunion for her. Walking through it one day, and I had on my Bengay, the closer's shirt, just because it was next up in the closet. There wasn't any reason. And I get to a timeshare booth uh, next to the food shoppers, and this guy says, Bengay, the closers, do you know him? I said, well, I'm sort
A
of.
little bit.
And he went on and on. I wish I'd had a case with me. He was raving about it. A bunch of people had stopped to listen. It changed my life. I was making, whatever, I forget what it was, $200 or $300 a week. Now I make $2,000 or $3,000 a day on a slow day. You and that book changed my life. And I've also had other comments, like a guy I was talking to one time who said, I got my book, I started reading it, I got up and shut my office door. I felt like no one should catch me reading the closers. I said,
Really?
why do you say that? He said, because it gave me an unfair advantage over the customer and over my fellow salespeople. So when you read the closers part one, what you're looking for is the red, and what it is the red raw meat of selling. It is not politically correct in numerous places. Keep in mind the original, I've revised it a little bit over the years, but not much. The original thing was written about 40 years ago when terminologies were different. So you'll see some things you go, oh, I don't think I'd written that. Well, I wouldn't write it today either. I would leave the concept in and the philosophy in and the psychological motivations in, just change a few words here and there. But I've decided not to do that. Somebody said to me one time, well, Ben, that'd be like penciling corrections in the Bible.
See, I
It,
agree with that. Yeah, you know me, I read a lot, and
mm-hmm.
I've read, I don't know how many hundreds of really old books, and I've got one that's, I'll have to send you the title because I don't even want to say it on the radio, but it's not nasty, but to me, it's just funny as all get out, but it's about the Deep South, so you can about imagine. And nothing in that book offends me. It was part of its time. I mean, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why
Yep.
people bother to get offended. Just when was it written? Okay, never mind, got it.
Think and Grow Rich by my old
Same
sweetheart from
thing.
the yeah. He
Yeah.
says, man, everywhere there's an opportunity. I don't think there's a woman mentioned in the book, but it was written in 1937.
As mankind. I still do
Yeah.
that. As far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned, mankind is male and female. It's just, plural.
Yeah. I agree, but not everyone is with us
Well,
on
uh,
that. Yeah.
I'm not going to change my mind on that one.
So it takes selling and goes to its core. And it can be used like anything can be used for good or evil, but it's pure in what it teaches you about selling. And then the closers part two picks up where that leaves off and sort of takes the rough edges. It shows you what sophisticated people really do, the master closers of the world really do with the red raw meat in part one. I think, and part one outsells part two. Part two, I wrote every single word in it on the legal pad by hand. So I'm perhaps emotionally more involved with it. But part two is a better book, in my opinion. And then someone was kind enough to point out to me, it's a better book if you know what's in part one.
Exactly. And I
So,
had to figure that out too because I started with part two only because you sent me both books. But when you were going to come on my podcast, your partner in Success Radio 150 years ago, seems like it was a very long time ago, we were going to talk about part two. So that's where I got stuck in.
well, as you know, I'm very proud of the last chapter in part two, sales infiltration, starts on
Right.
page 257, uh, because I think that's the best thing ever written about selling. But the more I thought about it, it's the best thing that was ever written about selling because you've read a lot about selling before you got to it. It,
Exactly.
it would be,
And it's an easier read. Part one
mhm,
is you have to sit with it's a dense book. There's a
mhm.
lot going on in there. But once you get through that and then you go back and like you know me, I will put sticky notes, I've got index cards. There are certain areas and I'm like, "Oh, let me go back. Let me go back." Part 2 is just super easy to read.
Well,
Part 1 is not necessarily all that easy, but it's meaty.
my English teacher, senior year in high school, Ms. Griffin, Edith Griffin, I found out years later, I didn't know teachers had first names other than Mrs. or Mr. Or Miss. But anyway, she told me always, she taught me a couple of great lessons. And I wish she knew I had become reasonably successful, but I wish she had lived long enough to know that we'd sold millions of copies of a book and I'd given 5,000 paid speeches. She was the one who taught me how to write. Uh, and a senior in high school, and I got her by chance. I didn't ask for her. She wasn't up on the rotation. I just wandered into her class because I was supposed to be in an English class, and she turned my life around. One was writing, and the other one was speaking. But
Speaking,
the yeah the because I gave the prayer at graduation. She said, "You're going to speak at graduation." I thought, "Oh, this poor little lady. She doesn't know my history." I thought she was talking about valedictorian or salutatorian
all
because
right.
I knew that wasn't really realistically an opportunity. But she had control over who gave the prayer. So she taught me how to write it and then drilled me for weeks in the high school cafeteria practicing doing it because you couldn't take notes up to the front, and literally turned my life around between writing and speaking. And I went down to the microphone. It was one of those tiered setups with all my classmates. Went down to the microphone and then did this. I wish we were on TV so you could see it. Did that gesture you do with both hands when you want the audience to rise.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I did that, and 3,000 people stood up, and I went, "Whoa!"
You
This
found
is
your home, your
yeah.
spiritual
I'm
home.
home.
Yeah.
I
But
wanted to do Simon Says. Simon Says sit down. Simon Says stand up. But anyway, in the writing category, she said always write. This is a classic line. She said, always write at a sixth grade level so you don't lose your audience. She said, fortunately for you, that won't be difficult. I said, thank you very much. And then she gave us a writing assignment. So I turned to the first page in a pad and started to write. She said, oh, no, 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 no. You're going to write about 20 pages of this. So flip back 20 pages, give it some thought, and write the last sentence of your paper, thesis, call it what you will. And I said, why the last sentence? She says, that gives you a North Star.
it's where you're heading. Now
Yeah,
you know where
that
you have to go and where you stop.
right. That's where you got to wind up. And you might change it as you go along, but not by much. That's your North Star. And so every book I've written, co-written, ghost-written 35 books. Every single book, the last sentence was written first. Thanks to her. She was just a wonderful person. And in selling, uh, giving a sales presentation, that's also true. Hi, my name's Ben Gay, but I already know where we're going to end up 15, 20 minutes from now when I say, based on what you told me, here's what I suggest we do.
Right.
Because that's where they all end up. And my closing rate is 86%. Has been ever since I was taught how to measure it. It's been 87 briefly, 82 sometimes, but 86% average because I know how to lay out a sales presentation. I've memorized the good ones. I've made the people I'm writing for memorize theirs. And if I have the ability to test them, they have to do it for me without notes or whatever. And then people say, well, I don't want to work with a script or anything because I can always tell when there's a script. And I said, no, you can't.
No, you can't. If you listen to my podcast, both of them, you can't tell. And I'm scripted to heck and back.
Yep. It's just crucial. Once you learn how to do something, why would you throw it up in the air and take your chances any other way? Wall Street Journal, I mentioned them 3 or 4 times today, has the classic all-time best direct mail letter ever written. And they've been using it for 40 or 50 years. And after the first year or so, not a word has changed. Most of our listeners have probably gotten it. I'm quoting from memory. This isn't exact, but 25 years ago on a bright spring day, 2 people graduated from, and I don't know if it remember if it names the college or not. And it goes on to say, one of them is now the president of the company, and the other one is stuck in middle management. What's the difference? Same education, same age, same everything, except one read the Wall Street Journal every day.
I have
That's the
actually seen that. Once you told me about it, I went and hunted it down. It's brilliant. I
It
mean,
is
it's
unbelievable.
absolutely brilliant.
It's been their control piece for over 40 years now. Control piece meaning they try to beat it. They send out other letters. And if they ever have one that beats it on a consistent basis, they'll change. But in the meantime, they sell more subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal with that 40-year-old or more letter than any other way. It's a beautiful, well thought out, well tested sales piece. It's a combination marketing. They mailed it to you, but it's a sales piece, takes you all the way down and closes you. So in the part 1 and 2 of the closers, we talk a lot about scripting, and done properly. People say, well, I can tell scripting when I hear it. No, you can't. Cary Grant, the old actor, said 2 quick ones, and I'll wrap up because I know we're running out of time. Somebody said to him one day, I wish I was Cary Grant. He said, so do I.
I love you.
Because,
Yeah.
but he understood the game. He understood he was born. He picked his parents carefully. He was born handsome, and he understood how to monopolize on that and create a character. Cary Grant not being his name, so he created a character. But he said one of the great sales lines of all times, although he was talking about acting, he said the secret of acting is not to get caught at it. That's also the secret of selling. You follow the pattern, you follow the tested techniques, you learn 42 closes, even if as in my case, I only use 1 or 2, but I couldn't have developed the 1 or 2 if I didn't know the other 42 and didn't know all the aspects of selling and the psychological aspects of selling. So that's how you get it down. So, like the Wall Street Journal's control piece, learn how to best present your products and present them as close as you can to that every time, adjusting for I'm talking to a man, a woman, I'm talking to an old person, a young person, I'm talking to a Jew, I'm talking to a Southern Baptist, I'm talking to whatever. Those things alter it. And the other little problem in selling, and this is the last for today, is you've been to sales school. You've read the sales books. They have not been to prospect school. They have not read the prospect books. So from time to time, they have not learned a script other than I want to think it over. They haven't learned a script. So they will say things that don't fit into your preconceived plan. That's okay. In the closers part 1, it shows you what to do when it comes off the rails, when it goes in a direction you don't want it to go or weren't expecting or what have you. So people say to me, Ben, I'd give anything in the world to know what you know about selling. I said, good news. I
Go to
wrote it
Ron
all
Sony
down.
Books. Ron Sony Books on eBay. You can
Yeah,
find
so
it.
which is the answer to their plight. Go to eBay, Ronzoni Books, and there's the closers, uh, all that are shippable today, and get a closers 1 and 2 in your hands minimum, plus the others you'll see there over time. And
Right.
with that, I'm done, young lady.
Well, I wanted to mention, we've talked about scripts quite a bit, and I actually make this because I do have to script. I've got sections of my podcast, Your Partner in Success Radio in particular, and it has to flow. It just has to flow. And I
Right.
will tell people, because I will not have you on the show without doing a pre-interview. It's just not going to happen. Don't ask. But I use the same script every single time, and I will tell them, listen, there's 2 things you need to know. Number 1, you don't need to be on camera. If you're a female, you don't even need to put a bra on. I don't care. You're not gonna be on camera. And then I'll say, listen, I'm scripted, and this is why, but you're not going to know that I'm scripted or I'm muting, and I tell them why. So they're fully prepared. And I always call them after the show. It's like, yeah, thank you. And they're like, I can't believe that was a script. It was 100% a script, but it's more of a bullet point for me because it is a
Hmm.
conversation. I'm going to say whatever I want to say. Snark is my second language. It's the language I'm the most comfortable in. But it's a script. I don't ever go off point. I don't ever wander around and go, oh, geez, where was I? It's important.
Absolutely. What if it's like flying in an airplane? I'd sort of like to think the pilot has been to pilot school.
Yeah, at, at least finished anyway.
Yeah. In the business, I've been hopping in planes and flying here and there. I have learned to ask because frequently I've never met the pilot before. If it's not one of our old corporate pilots, I always say, "How many hours you got in your logbook?" I will not get in a plane with a 300-hour pilot. There are the mountainsides of America and the rest of the world are littered with the bodies of
Mm,
300-hour pilots.
I bet. You have to pay attention to what you're doing, where you're at, and what you're talking about, who you're talking with. We're going to cover all of this as we go back deeper into the closers part 1. So, Ben, I took notes. I actually took notes, and I'm following your instructions, and we'll talk about a lot of this next week.
I look forward to it.
Me too. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for being with us. Go get these books. Seriously. The best way to learn from what Ben has to share with you is to read the books with us. Go along with us. And seriously, go to Ronzoni Books on eBay, get the books, and then you'll thank me later. Ben, I'll see you next Wednesday.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.